It was October 6th, 1973. In Israel, families gathered for Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. Streets were quiet, shops closed, even the radio went silent. Soldiers went home on leave. The entire nation seemed frozen in prayer. But across the Suez Canal, Egyptian divisions were on the move. Tanks rolled into position, pontoon bridges were prepared in secrecy, and aircraft lined up for a massive first strike. To the north, Syrian forces massed on the Golan Heights, ready to reclaim land lost 6 years earlier. Israel believed it was safe. After the lightning victory of the Six-Day War, its leaders thought no Arab army would dare to attack again. But Egyptian President Anwar Sadat had spent years rebuilding his forces, training, arming, and plotting. The trap was ready. At 2 p.m., the silence of Yom Kippur shattered. Over 200 Egyptian planes roared across the Suez Canal, striking Israeli positions in the Sinai. Artillery thundered, 2,000 guns firing in unison, shaking the desert. Within minutes, the Egyptian army surged forward. Soldiers in rubber boats crossed the canal, carrying assault ladders and RPGs. Behind them, engineers assembled pontoon bridges under fire. Egyptian infantry stormed the massive Israeli sand ramparts, using water cannons to carve breaches into walls once thought unscalable. Israel's vaunted Bar Lev line, a chain of forts guarding the canal, crumbled in hours. Over 80,000 Egyptian troops crossed by nightfall. For the first time since 1967, the Arab armies were not retreating. They were advancing. At the very same hour, Syria struck. Hundreds of tanks rolled across the Golan Heights, supported by waves of infantry. Israeli defenders were caught off guard. Many tanks unmanned, crews still rushing back from leave. For 48 hours, the Golan became an inferno. Outnumbered nearly 10-1, Israeli tank crews fought desperate defensive battles, sometimes firing until their barrels overheated. Syrian forces surged deep into the plateau, threatening to break through toward northern Israel. But here, terrain favored the defenders. Israeli gunners used ridges and choke points to ambush advancing armor. Slowly, the Syrian assault began to stall. Still, the cost was enormous. Dozens of Israeli tanks lost, entire units wiped out. The war was no longer one-sided. By October 8th, Israel was mobilized. Reserve units poured into the Sinai and Golan. The calm confidence of 1967 was gone, replaced with urgency, even fear. In the Sinai, Israel tried a counterattack. Hundreds of tanks pushed forward to drive the Egyptians back across the canal. But this time, it wasn't so easy. Egyptian troops carried advanced Soviet-made anti-tank missiles, the deadly Sagar. From concealed positions, they knocked out wave after wave of Israeli armor. In a single day, Israel lost more tanks than in the entire Six-Day War. On the Golan, the fight was just as brutal. By sheer determination, Israeli tankers halted the Syrian advance only a few kilometers from the Sea of Galilee. By October 10th, reinforcements allowed Israel to push the Syrians back, even advancing toward Damascus. The war had turned into a grinding contest of attrition. Sadat had achieved his first goal, crossing the canal and restoring Arab pride. But now, he pressed further. Egyptian armored divisions moved beyond their air defenses and into Israel's killing zones. This was the moment Israel had been waiting for. On October 14th, one of the largest tank battles since World War II erupted in the Sinai. Over 2,000 tanks clashed across the desert sands. Israeli gunners, aided by superior maneuver tactics, tore through Egyptian armor. Hundreds of tanks burned in the dunes. With Egypt's momentum broken, Israel prepared its own daring gamble. crossing the canal in reverse. Under cover of night, Israeli paratroopers crossed the Suez Canal near the Great Bitter Lake. Engineers threw up pontoon bridges, while tanks rumbled across into Egyptian territory. The tables had turned. Now it was Israel behind Egyptian lines, threatening supply routes, command posts, even Cairo itself. Egyptian forces found themselves encircled, with an entire army trapped on the East Bank. In desperation, Cairo called on Moscow. At the same time, Israel turned to Washington. The war was no longer just Arab versus Israeli. The superpowers were watching closely, each side resupplying its ally, each calculating how far they were willing to go. The world teetered on the edge of nuclear escalation. By late October, the United Nations scrambled to impose a ceasefire. On the Syrian front, Israeli forces stood within artillery range of Damascus. In Egypt, Israeli armor had cut deep into the Nile Delta. Yet the cost had been staggering. Thousands dead on both sides. Entire armored brigades wiped out. Civilians displaced, families shattered. On October 25th, the guns finally fell silent. The Yom Kippur War was over. Egypt had reclaimed its honor. Israel had survived, but at a price it had never before experienced. The Yom Kippur War changed the Middle East forever. For Egypt, the successful canal crossing restored confidence, paving the way for Sadat's later peace treaty with Israel. For Syria, the loss hardened resentment, fueling decades of hostility. For Israel, the war was a shock that shattered illusions of invincibility. It forced military reforms, intelligence overhauls, and a sobering reminder: survival could never be taken for granted. And for the world, the war was a warning. How a regional conflict could draw in superpowers, risking escalation on a global scale. The deserts of Sinai and the ridges of the Golan had burned with fire and steel. But their echoes still shape the Middle East to this day. If you found this glimpse into history interesting, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories from the past.